One of the most powerful things a woman can give a man is not constant attention, endless compliments, or dramatic declarations of love. It is something much quieter, the feeling of being genuinely seen, because there is a difference between being noticed and being understood. A man can have people around him all day and still feel completely invisible. He can be praised for his work, expected to be strong for his family, relied upon by everyone around him, and still quietly wonder whether anyone actually sees what is happening inside him. That is why small gestures can carry such enormous emotional weight. When a woman remembers something he mentioned casually weeks ago, she communicates something deeper than memory. She is saying, without saying it, "What you told me mattered enough for me to remember." That can reach a place inside him that grand romantic gestures often cannot. Maybe he once mentioned that an important meeting was making him nervous. Days later, she asks, "How did that meeting go?" It seems simple, but imagine how that feels from his side. He realizes that while he may have forgotten the conversation, she didn't. She wasn't simply waiting for her turn to speak. She was listening. And genuine listening is one of the rarest forms of affection. Another powerful gesture is noticing changes in his emotional state without immediately turning them into an interrogation. If he comes home quieter than usual, she might simply say, "You seem a little tired today. I'm here if you want to talk." Then she gives him space. That balance matters. She notices him without invading him. This is where emotional intelligence becomes more powerful than performance. She doesn't need to fix every problem. She doesn't need to have the perfect advice. Sometimes what touches a man most is knowing that someone recognizes his struggle without making him feel weak for having one. And there is another layer to being seen. Appreciating qualities that aren't obvious. Maybe she notices how patiently he treats his parents. Maybe she sees how hard he works, even when nobody applauds him. Maybe she recognizes that he always checks whether everyone else is comfortable before thinking about himself. When she acknowledges those details, she isn't simply complimenting him. She is reflecting back a version of himself that he may not always recognize. That is what makes this gesture so powerful. People naturally become emotionally connected to those who make them feel understood, not because they are being manipulated, but because genuine recognition creates psychological safety. It tells a person, you don't have to perform to be valuable here. And when a man experiences that consistently, something begins to change. He may start sharing more. He may become more emotionally expressive. He may feel comfortable revealing thoughts he normally keeps private, not because she demanded vulnerability from him, but because her actions quietly demonstrated that vulnerability would be respected. The woman who makes a man feel seen doesn't need to be perfect. She simply pays attention. She remembers. She listens. She notices the things others overlook, and sometimes the smallest sentence, "I noticed," "I remembered," or "I understand," can make someone feel more deeply valued than 1,000 dramatic words ever could. Once a man feels genuinely seen, something even deeper begins to matter. The emotional atmosphere he experiences when he is around a woman. Because attraction may bring two people together, but emotional safety is often what allows a connection to become meaningful. A woman can be beautiful, intelligent, successful, and exciting, but if every interaction feels like a test he might fail, eventually he becomes emotionally exhausted. What touches him deeply is the feeling that he can be human without constantly defending himself. This doesn't mean a woman should tolerate disrespect or hide her feelings just to keep a man comfortable. Emotional safety isn't silence. It is the ability to communicate honestly without turning every disagreement into a battle for control. Think about the difference between these two reactions. A man comes home after a difficult day and seems distant. One response might immediately be, "What's wrong with you? Why are you acting like this?" The other might simply say, "You seem like you've had a rough day. Take your time. I'm here if you want to talk." The second response doesn't solve his problem. It doesn't demand an explanation. It simply creates room, and that room can be incredibly powerful. Many people spend their lives surrounded by expectations. Be productive, be confident, be strong, have the answer, keep moving, don't complain, don't show weakness. So when someone enters their life and communicates through her behavior that they don't have to perform every second, that relationship can begin to feel different. Sometimes peace looks incredibly ordinary. Sitting quietly beside him after a stressful day, bringing him his favorite drink without being asked, giving him a warm hug without turning it into a conversation, saying, "You don't have to figure everything out tonight." These gestures don't appear dramatic from the outside, but emotionally they can carry tremendous meaning. The important part is that she isn't using kindness as a transaction. She isn't thinking, "I was supportive, so now you owe me something." Her warmth comes from genuine care. And that's where the gesture becomes even more powerful. A man can sense when affection has conditions attached to it. If every kind action is followed by a demand, criticism, or reminder of what he should do next, the relationship can begin to feel like another responsibility. But when kindness is given freely, it creates a different emotional association. Her presence begins to represent comfort rather than pressure. At the same time, emotional safety doesn't mean removing all challenge from a relationship. A strong woman can still disagree with him. She can establish boundaries. She can tell him when something hurts her. The difference is in how she communicates it. Instead of attacking his character, she addresses the behavior. Instead of trying to win, she tries to understand. That distinction matters because a healthy relationship should feel like two people standing on the same side, even when they disagree. When a man repeatedly experiences that kind of environment, he may begin to lower the emotional armor he has built over years. He may talk about fears he normally hides. He may share dreams he rarely discusses. He may become more affectionate because he no longer feels that every vulnerable moment will be judged. And that is the deeper meaning of giving someone peace. It isn't becoming responsible for their happiness. It is creating a relationship where both people can breathe, communicate, and remain themselves without constantly fearing rejection. When a woman becomes associated with that kind of emotional safety, her presence can become something a man genuinely looks forward to. Not because she controls his emotions, but because being around her feels like coming back to a place where he can finally put the armor down. Once a man feels seen and emotionally safe, another gesture begins to carry enormous weight, recognizing the effort behind what he does. This may sound simple, but there is a profound difference between praising an outcome and appreciating the intention that produced it. Many people notice the finished result. Far fewer notice the thought, sacrifice, patience, or effort that happened before anyone could see the result. Imagine a man spends hours fixing something around the house. Perhaps everything works perfectly afterward, but nobody says anything because the result is simply expected. Now imagine someone quietly saying, I noticed how much time you put into that. Those words aren't really about the task anymore. They communicate recognition. They tell him that his contribution did not disappear into the background. And this matters because human beings naturally want to know that their efforts have meaning. A man doesn't necessarily need constant praise. In fact, excessive praise can sometimes feel empty. What often feels more meaningful is specific appreciation. Instead of simply saying, "You're amazing," she might say, "I know you were exhausted, but you still made time to help me." That sentence carries detail. It shows that she was paying attention. She noticed the sacrifice. She noticed the choice. She noticed the effort. That kind of appreciation can create a powerful emotional connection because it makes a person feel understood at a deeper level. He isn't being valued only for what he produces. He is being valued for the intention behind his actions. And there is another important dimension to this. Appreciation becomes especially meaningful when it is offered for the things that aren't performed for attention. Maybe he quietly handles a responsibility without mentioning it. Maybe he checks on someone he cares about. Maybe he remembers something important to her and takes care of it before she asks. When she notices those moments, she communicates something incredibly powerful. I see the things you do even when you're not asking anyone to notice. That can change the emotional atmosphere of a relationship. But appreciation should never become manipulation. A woman shouldn't praise a man simply to make him behave a certain way or to secure something from him later. Genuine appreciation has no hidden invoice attached to it. It is simply an honest acknowledgement of something she values. And the beautiful part is that this principle works both ways. A relationship becomes stronger when both people develop the habit of noticing each other's contributions. When a man feels appreciated, he is often more likely to continue investing emotionally. Not because he has been trained to perform for approval, but because his efforts feel meaningful within the relationship. Think about how different that feels from criticism. Criticism says, "You should have done more." Appreciation says, "I noticed what you did." One creates pressure, the other creates connection. Of course, appreciation doesn't mean ignoring problems. If something genuinely needs to change, healthy communication still matters. But when appreciation exists alongside honest communication, criticism doesn't become the only language between two people. Small acknowledgments can therefore become emotional anchors. A simple, "Thank you for taking care of that. I know that wasn't easy." Or, "I really appreciate the thought you put into this," can have far more impact than a dramatic compliment, because underneath those words is a message that everyone wants to receive. Your effort matters to me. I don't take you for granted. And when someone consistently feels that their presence and contribution are recognized, emotional investment can naturally deepen. They aren't simply participating in a relationship. They begin to feel that what they give, what they do, and who they are genuinely have a place there. The deepest kind of affection often appears in a surprisingly simple gesture, making someone feel important without making them feel controlled. A woman can communicate that a man matters to her while still giving him the freedom to remain himself. That balance is powerful because healthy connection isn't about possession. It is about choosing each other freely. There is a major difference between wanting someone's presence and needing to control their behavior. When affection becomes mixed with constant testing, jealousy, monitoring, or emotional pressure, the relationship can slowly lose its sense of freedom. Instead of feeling like a place where two people choose each other, it begins to feel like a place where one person is constantly trying to prove something. But imagine a different dynamic. She enjoys hearing from him, but she doesn't panic when he is busy. She appreciates his attention, but she doesn't demand that he abandon everything else in his life. She expresses her feelings openly, but she doesn't use silence or jealousy as punishment. Her message is simple. I value you, but I don't need to control you to feel secure. That kind of confidence can be deeply attractive because it creates emotional space. A man doesn't feel as though he has to constantly defend his independence. At the same time, he knows that his presence matters. She may tell him, I really enjoyed having you here today, or I love the way you make me laugh. Those statements communicate affection without creating obligation. And this is where genuine choice becomes important. People tend to value relationships more deeply when they feel they are participating because they want to, not because they are being pressured. When someone has room to make choices, their continued investment carries greater meaning. His call matters more when he makes it because he genuinely wants to hear her voice. His effort means more when it comes from desire rather than fear of an argument. This doesn't mean pretending not to care. In fact, the opposite is true. A woman can be direct about what she wants. She can say, I would love to spend more time together, instead of creating a situation where he has to guess what she is thinking. She can express disappointment without turning it into punishment. She can set boundaries without threatening the relationship. That combination of warmth and self-respect creates clarity. And perhaps one of the most powerful gestures is allowing a man to see that she has a life of her own. She has interests, friendships, goals, routines, and ambitions that don't disappear when she enters a relationship. She doesn't make him responsible for filling every emotional space in her world. That doesn't create distance. Done healthily, it creates appreciation. He gets to experience her presence as something valuable rather than something guaranteed. And she gets to experience his presence in the same way. The strongest connection isn't built when two people become completely dependent on one another. It is built when two whole individuals decide that their lives are better together. So when she shows affection without manipulation, appreciation without expectation, and closeness without control, she communicates something remarkably powerful. I want you here, but I respect your freedom to choose. That message can transform the emotional quality of a relationship, because when love doesn't feel like a cage, staying becomes a choice. And when two people continue choosing each other, not out of fear, pressure, or obligation, but because they genuinely value what they share, the connection can become deeper, calmer, and far more meaningful.